Welcome to the podcast. Most people don't, but you do. We have stories and conversations about people that are excellent, people that are going above and beyond, people that come up with an idea and then take it to fruition and implement things. Today's guest is certainly that person. His name is Robert Shelton. I want to share a little bit about how I initially met Robert, why I really was asking him to be on this podcast, and then a little bit about his background. For our listeners out there, you have heard me reference the term Goose Cup before, and it is this wonderful coffee shop in Leesburg, Virginia. As a result of working there with my wife, not working as in serving coffee, but working there as a common space, we have met the most amazing people. And Robert is certainly one of those individuals. Even though he's retired, he will go there just to find some creative juices and meet people and share the vibrancy of everything that is taking place there. I had the pleasure of meeting him officially several months ago. And when I started getting to talk to Robert a little bit more, I realized he has such an interesting story. I just needed him to be on the podcast. He's a retired senior technology executive with over 20 years of experience at Microsoft. He served as the Senior Technical Director and Chief Technical Officer for the National Intelligence Business Unit. So his expertise is in IT executive management, cloud computing, enterprise software sales, and the applied uses of artificial intelligence. And it goes on, his bio goes on to talk about his bio is really only a surface. It's only scratching the surface of who he is. He shares growing up in an economically disadvantaged area, and he's been faced with challenges that have shaped his journey. Right now, we want to get into what has he learned along the way? What is most valuable to him right now? So without further ado, Robert Shelton, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Really appreciate the opportunity.
And Robert, I need to share this story that really left a very powerful imprint on my mind and also on my wife Terry's mind when we had asked you about retirement and looking back on it. What were there any regrets? And you shared the story about your son and essentially working from home on a Zoom call. And I would like for you to be able to share that story. And then I want to go backwards from there. Do you remember what you shared?
Probably him walking into my office and not having the time to talk to him. Yeah.
Yeah, not being available to be interrupted. And you shared very deeply, and Robert, thank you. And we want to get into the heart of this. Out of all the things that you've accomplished when you were with Microsoft, phenomenal things and great projects and great advancements and checking off the to-do list, you shared with Terry and I, you said, I don't even remember what that call was about. I don't remember who was on it, if it was important, if it was a new product, it didn't even matter. But all you remembered was that your son wanted to come in to talk to you about something and you shut the door. And thank you for sharing that, because as I'm going around the country talking about positivity, I'm beginning, hopefully you're okay, and I give you credit to share that story, right? That of all the great success that you've had, looking back on it, there's a couple of regrets as well. But I want to start off, Robert, and thank you again for sharing and opening up your heart to share that with us. Tell us about growing up. And you referenced that it was, right, an economically disadvantaged area. What can you share with our listeners about growing up?
Yeah, I grew up in a part of Maryland called Prince George's County, which is most well known for the basketball players that have come out of there, Kevin Durant being one of them. But I grew up in a neighborhood that another famous person that you have to be a little older to remember grew up in. His name is Sugar Ray Leonard. He was an Olympic boxer and a world champion boxer. So I grew up in the neighborhood he grew up in. And I proudly actually tell people throughout my career that I grew up in the hood. It was, at the time, it wasn't particularly, didn't feel dangerous or any of the things that you see on TV, but it was definitely a community of people who were, for the most part, working extremely hard just to scrape through life. And one of the things that I remember about that experience is that I grew up in the 70s and early 80s were my late 70s, early 80s were my teenage years. I remember growing up watching shows like Dallas and Knots Landing, I think was the name of the show, and Lifestyles was a Rich and Famous, and these were the TV shows that I remember watching, and I remember thinking, like, I've never seen any place that looks like any of the places that are represented on TV.
Mm.
And more interestingly, for someone like me, I didn't see anyone who looked like me on TV, living or being in these places. And like everyone around me, generations of people who never see themselves in ways that other Americans see success. They never see themselves in the picture when you see success.
Yeah.
During that period of time, I just blew it off as entertainment, not being real. But interestingly, a friend of my mom's who was a teacher in Montgomery County, the neighboring county at the time, actually took me on a drive to a gated community of the biggest homes that I'd ever seen in my life. The home I live in now is probably twice the size of one of the ones that I saw that day. But it was a gated community, and I remember being nervous about being there and him trying to get me to relax. Saw kids come out of the home. It was early Saturday or Sunday morning, and kids started streaming out of the homes to go do whatever they were going to do that day. And all the kids were Black. They looked like me.
Wow.
And I was amazed because this community, which was maybe 20 minutes from where I grew up, looked like Knox Landing or Dallas or Lifestyle and Rich and Famous. And he told me that I could have the lifestyle like this as well. And I'll tell you, throughout my life, there have been several people who have told me something
Yes.
that at the time was probably not big to them, throwaway comment to them that like turned my life into a different direction.
Mm.
And when I made it my mission at that point to somehow or another get out of the hood and become successful. But, and I'll finish with this, it turns out that some of the lessons that I learned while living in that economically disadvantaged area, or AKA the hood, taught me things that made it even possible for me to have worked at Microsoft and been able to retire at a relatively early age in life. So without the first part, I couldn't have had this second part.
Mm.
So the first act in my life's journey is very important.
Yeah. Did you know, Robert, that it was bad? Did you view growing up in the hood as bad?
It's interesting when you grow up in an environment, your perspective on that environment is very different from those who look in this case, in America's case, often look down on you in that environment. I didn't think of it as bad. It was normal. I knew what to do and what not to do to stay safe. I live in a much more affluent neighborhood now, but I'm still a Black American. I know what to do and what not to do in order to stay safe in my very affluent neighborhood.
Mm.
And not in actual fact, I felt safer there in a lot of respects than I feel in my very affluent neighborhood at times.
Wow. And that's so wrong. And I'm sorry that you feel that way. That is just so wrong. And I want to dive more into this aspect of growing up Prince George's County. Did you have brothers and sisters growing up?
I have a sister and I have two step siblings as well. We all grew up I'm the oldest. The younger ones grew up in a mixed sort of situation where my parents, my mother and my stepfather moved to a much better area as they grew up later in life. But myself and my next sibling, we basically grew up in that area.
And one of the questions that I was going to ask that you already addressed were some of the major early influencers in your life. And it sounds like that teacher was certainly one of them. Was that his intention? Was it scheduled between your mom and the teacher to say, oh, take Robert to this neighborhood to see what he can have? Do you remember the circumstances? Was it about a life lesson or more?
So.
Yeah.
I think so. So I was very early age, I was into computers and he was also into computers and he was a friend of my mom's and we connected on this computer thing. And I remember having a conversation with him once while I was over at his house, helping him build an Apple Lisa, if I remember correctly. Oh no, it's an Apple IIe, if I remember correctly. And we were putting the thing together and asking me questions about what I saw in my future. And I don't remember what I answered, but I remember him looking at me out of concern that I didn't feel like I had a future. Again, everything that I'd seen and everyone I knew worked generally low-end jobs, and you just scrape your way through. And I assumed that is what life is.
Yes.
I had no exposure to anything else.
Yes. Did your mother and your stepfather at the time growing up, like the early ages, right, the 70s as a teenager, were they encouraging you to be able to get out of that neighborhood per se and to have a different life for yourself? Do you remember? Were they encouraging that way? Or was it also, we're a loving family, we're a happy family. Yes, we don't have everything. Do you remember what some of the conversations were like?
Yeah, my stepfather didn't come along until I was 18 or 19, and he was influential in a different way because I didn't have my birth father didn't live with us. My stepfather came and essentially taught me how to be a upstanding male and a good human being. I credit him for a lot of the male aspects of that, my mom for everything else. So it was a single mom, and my mom didn't have a lot of education, and she was scraping along as a single mom with 2 kids at the time. But yeah, she talked to me about doing better in life, and she was really big into self-help. And Dyer, she had Wayne Dyer books, and she read them, and then eventually I read them, and again, later on, when another pivotal moment, I worked at K Jewelers, which it was in the mall in the hood. So I always joke about I sold diamonds in the hood, but it was during that particular job, an early job of mine, was critical in a lot of ways. One, it taught me how to sell. And I don't mean sell products. I meant how to represent myself and actually communicate with people, and of all types. Second thing, I had an interesting encounter in which he came in and he was in overalls. It was all oily and he didn't smell great. And he had a bag. It was an oily bag that he laid on our diamond counter. We kept this place meticulous. K Jewelers was at the time, and I assume still, very high end for our area jewelry store. And no one would wait on him. And to get him out, I decided to wait on him. And he wanted to see all these expensive diamonds. And I was like, oh God, this is going to be a waste. I'm looking down on him. And it turns out this particular gentleman he was white in a mall in the hood. So that was an oddity in itself. But he didn't look like he had any money. He ended up buying probably the most expensive piece of jewelry that I'd ever sold in my time there. And he paid cash. In that oily bag,
yes,
was cash. And at the time, that was an oddity, and I had to bring my managers in, and they helped close the transaction because it was well over the IRS reporting limit, and they had to go and do whatever that was about. And I got a chance to talk to him, and it turns out that he owned a string of Jiffy Lubes in our area.
Okay.
But he still liked to go and work in the shops occasionally to get a feel for what was going on. And he happened to be working in the shop that day. When he came in, I looked down on him like much of society looks on people who live where I live.
Sure.
It turns out that he was much more than the greasy overalls and the greasy bag, which had cash in it. He was much, much more. And I learned from that I needed to look at life a little differently, not just about myself, but about other people. And everybody has within them the ability to succeed. That teacher gave me the insight to that gentleman was an example of it. And it was things like that kind of propelled me.
Amazing. First of all, that your mother was reading Dr. Wayne Dyer is incredible. That she passed on the books to you and you took an interest and you read them. Remarkable. And then the lessons that you just shared about not judging people when perhaps individuals where you were growing up would have been judged. And here you are initially judging someone else. What a valuable lesson. Doesn't matter what people look like, smell, act like, talk like, dress like. Everyone has a story and everyone has significance in this world, and everyone can find success, whatever success looks like to you.
Yes.
Incredibly valuable. Robert, you had mentioned also about being interested in computers at a young age and helping this teacher then construct an Apple device. Did that come naturally to you? Were you just intrigued with knowing how things worked, or was that somehow taught to you or instilled in you?
So it's interesting during that period of time. Of course, this is pre-internet. This was even pre-books. There weren't even books to go buy. I was an introvert, still am an introvert. Often I'll put on the suit of an extrovert and go out in the world and I will do extrovert looking things, but I can't wait to get back home because I'm an introvert. And so I was an introvert, spending a lot of time in my room. My mom also didn't allow me to go out and do some of the things that the other kids got to do because she wanted me to be safe. And I look back now and think, thank God she didn't allow me to go do some of the things. But again, personality wise, I don't think I would have done it much anyway. So I sat in my room and my mom bought me a very early entry, very cheap piece of technology that had the ability to program. And I went and learned how to program. Again, no books or anything. And turns out that I was really good at it. I'm like naturally adept at the things that you need to do in order to become proficient in computers. So that's how I started.
Okay. And remind me, you said you're the oldest child.
Yes.
You have some step siblings, but not and who you grew up with. Was it a brother or a sister, younger brother?
Younger sister.
Younger sister. Okay, thank you. And um, is she intelligent with regard to her depth with computer related things and technology?
I wouldn't say she's a small business owner in the human resources field. She is more of a, I would say, an empath like my mom. She feels and works with people in a much more close way than I would. Again, I don't know if she's an extrovert or not, but she definitely leans more in that direction than I do. So she's not the geek of the family. I'm the geek.
Okay, got it, got it. All right, so then after let's say high school, you're growing up, you're learning how to do different things with computers as an example. Were you a good student in high school?
No, actually, I was a C student at best. But I found it what I find interesting. Your previous guest on your previous episode talked about getting bused. I think she was in Tennessee or something like that. My group got bused to a white school in a neighboring suburb, more affluent suburb. I remember as I was listening to her podcast, I remember an experience where I thought to myself, these kids, meaning the white kids,
Hmm.
seem to approach going to school very differently than the kids in my neighborhood. For us, it was a social thing, right? I mean, we
Hmm.
didn't think about the education as in something you needed in order to be successful in life. Because again, I'm generalizing here, but generally, most of the people I grew up with or lived around didn't really require an education to do the kind of jobs that we did.
Hmm.
So I didn't think about education in terms of I did think about going to college, but I didn't think about it the same way as the other kids that we got busted. They seem to take school a lot more seriously.
Yeah.
I did go to college. Actually, turned out again as an opportunity to keep me out off the streets. My mom took me after in high school. She took me after my classes, and she took me to the community college. And so I was taking programming classes at the community college at the age of 15, 16 years old. But unlike all my other siblings, I never actually graduated college until I was in my late 40s. So,
Wow. Wow.
but one of the things that I found out along that journey, again, when I was selling diamonds in the hood, I was also listening for myself. I started listening to Zig Ziglar,
Hmm.
who is very famous, his sales motive, but I think think of him as more of a life motivational speaker than a sales motivational speaker. But he
Hmm.
kept talking about basically it was how you looked at yourself and looked at life he said it's your aptitude that determines your altitude. And so I started reading more and found out that I actually was pretty smart, really good at math,
Hmm.
which makes sense if you're in computers. And like I taught myself to speed read. I did all of these things.
Yeah.
And I basically consumed as much as I could in the way of business books in addition to technology.
Uh-huh.
And then how these things connect. It was
Yeah.
later on when I got interviewed for a position at a company who assumed that I had a master's degree.
Yes.
I got the job, Much later on, they realized I had no degree. And
Uh-huh.
it was a requirement to have a degree to even have a job. So somehow or another, I snuck through. But it was my dedication to my education outside of the education system that actually propelled me. And,
Yeah. Ugh.
you know,
I love hearing this. And Robert, me sitting down with you at a coffee shop, I would not be learning all of this. But now we have so many more things to see to talk about when I see you in person. But it reminds me of our two most recent guests on the podcast. Nicole Cable is one woman who you were referencing. She was telling me the story of she was bused to an all-white school right from her neighborhood, and she had never met a Crystal before. Just a name. She never
yeah,
met a Crystal
yeah,
before.
yeah,
And then when she met Crystal's mother, she thought Crystal's mother had probably never met a Black person before. So, right, an interesting concept, but yet dedicated, not looking at color. In
yeah,
fact, people were more upset with her when people would treat her rudely in a disrespectful manner than she was at, because she would say, I'm not taking it personally, right? I'm going to not, it's Q-tip, quit taking it personally.
yeah, yeah,
But then the second guest that was just broadcast last week, Melissa Fritz, who is the founder of Inside Senior Living TV. I made the incorrect assumption, Robert, when we're talking. I was like, okay, so after high school, what did you do? Tell me about college and university. And sadly, I was making that assumption that people that I have on this call go to high school or go to college or university. And I felt really bad that I made that assumption because she didn't, right? But here she is starting her own media company, very successful, right? Took classes, did not have a degree. So I love that you share that. And I'm in support of education, whatever that looks like, for whoever that looks like, how whatever that looks like. That's probably not correct grammar. But I'm so appreciative that you're sharing that. I just met with another common friend yesterday, and we said, where is XYZ going to go to school? She's thinking about this, but so what about your son? You know what? I'm thinking he probably wants a trade degree. I think he wants to become a welder because that's what he's really good at and passionate about. And my response is good for them, right? Whatever they want to do. So thank you for sharing that, Robert. Can you tell us a little bit more about when the organization found out that you didn't have this master's degree or doctorate degree? What did they assist you in getting one, or what happened, I guess?
No, I actually got my degree in my late 40s in order to show my son that you have to complete things that you start. So it was much later that I finished the degree with a 3.9 GPA nonetheless. I'm proud of that, even though by the time I got the degree, I didn't need a degree. But that organization, they hired me in as a help desk guy. I changed printer toner and made sure the printers had paper and ran around and did odds and ends and quickly took on one project after another. Whenever they had a hard project and said, hey, we need somebody to do this, I was already volunteering before the sentence got finished. Right? Whereas the rest of the IT professionals didn't. It was during the dot-com boom, and they lost most of the staff. And I was one of the few people left, and they were like, are you okay with managing the team until we get someone else? And again, I was already volunteering for it before they got to the till we get someone else part.
Yeah.
Eventually I'd proven that I could do the job, and they were like, okay, we'll just make you the full-time person, which is how I got into the position without them actually doing any type of background check. Because I didn't need a degree to get the original job.
Yes.
And I got an in-house promotion to management. And so by the time they found out, I had already been the manager for a good year. And I had turned the company around from a technology perspective and was about to leave, actually, to go to a new company when a conversation finally came up, and they were just lost as to how that happened. And I explained it. And I told them, I said, my personal belief is you hire the best person for the job. If you filter people based off of how they took tests or had access to things like college, you can lose some of the best people. One of my heroes at the time was Bill Gates, no college degree. Mark Zuckerberg, no college degree.
Yeah.
Right. And so Elon Musk, although he's not my favorite person in the world, no college degree.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And it goes back to the non-judgmental aspect. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what they look like, what they smell, what color their skin is, where they went to school, if they went to school. Are they a good human being, and are they the right person? In this example, are they the right person for the job?
Yes. And you have to not be lazy, right? Because
Yeah.
the that a lot of these recruiting works, they look to see if you have the right words on your resume. Well, heck, I can put anything on my resume,
Right.
right? Literally anything on my resume. I've
Right.
interviewed people who literally put anything, they put all the words from the job description into the resume.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And then you make a judgment based off of that. And
Hmm.
it's often when you actually meet and talk to the person,
Hmm.
like some of the most talented technologists that I've ever met
Hmm.
had a high school diploma or a GED.
Hmm.
And then not only were they the most talented, but because they had some of a chip on their shoulder, they worked the hardest.
Right.
I've also had people who had degrees from MIT or Harvard who
Mm.
could not hold a candle to these people.
Understood. Understood.
So, you know,
Yeah. Robert, so looking back on all the things that you've accomplished, and we will talk about your time, of course, with Microsoft. Was there a particular driving force? If I just ask you, Robert, why have you worked so hard? Why did you get to retire so early? How did you accomplish all these promotions? From a professional lens, you have done so much. The question is, why?
yeah, that one is a complex question. I want to give you like not too long, but a very full answer because some of this has affected how I've started my new journey in my retired phase of my life.
Mhm.
The reason why is two parts. One is I wanted to get out of the hood. I wanted to live the life that I saw on Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous or in that neighborhood that I saw. And Zig Ziglar, which if you know anything about Zig, he's a Southern guy from, I think from, I forget where in Mississippi. He is not the typical person that someone like me growing up where I lived would
Mhm.
have listened to. But that guy came from a place that was way more economically disadvantaged than I did. And he achieved so much. And I would just listen to his, at this time, audio tapes, cassette tapes, on my way to work, on my way to school. I would just constantly listen. And he essentially reprogrammed my thinking. So that
Mhm.
not only could I want to get out of the hood, but that he told me that I could get out of the hood if
Mm.
I just believed and worked myself in that direction, which is basically what I did. So that's the why was to get out of the hood.
Mhm.
The how was a reprogramming of my mind set in such a way, because again, where I grew up, everybody told you this is as far as you can get, right? That other world's not for you. And his whole thing was you can have anything you want.
Mm.
Right. My favorite quote is you can have anything you want if you help enough other people get what they want.
Yes.
And that was my mindset along the way in various forms, in which I'll talk about later. But the thing that I want to fast forward to for people, I know you speak to a lot of people in corporate America, the downside of that approach,
Mhm.
like I had single mode, I was focused on success and making money to have the life that I have now. I achieved the goals that I set out to. The problem is I left a lot of bodies along the road, right? I
Mhm.
was so focused on getting to where I want that I didn't take enough time to really be compassionate towards those who are also on their own journey. And so now I think about I could have done what I was trying to do
Mhm.
in a way that could have also been more uplifting and supportive to other people who are on their own journey. And interestingly enough, if I had helped those other people, which I do a lot now, I do a lot of mentoring now,
Right.
I'd help those other people along the way. Imagine how much fuel they could have added to my rocket.
Yes, there would be no regret, Robert. There would not be any regret. And I'm so proud of you, right, as a friend that you are working through this and that you have realized that. There are so many people that just think, and I'll quote you, bigger houses, more cars, more toys, more boats, early retirement. Great. But at what expense? Some people do it and they run out of steam and they're not focusing on their health and being, and they have a heart attack and they never get to where they're going, or they have a heart attack 3 months after they retire, and have to change their lifestyle. What are you, would you consider yourself in the day when you're talking about leaving bodies? And I don't want this to be negative, but it might come across as negative. Would you backstab others? Would you take advantage of others in order to move up the ladder per se, or to gain accomplishments? And if this is not a comfortable question, you certainly don't have to answer it, but I'm curious. I don't know I left bodies behind. What does that mean?
Yeah, I didn't do that. Honestly, I was not in, typically people like myself are not given the opportunity to backstab and that sort of thing. We're often, you hear the common refrain where African Americans talk about having to be 4 times better than everyone else, right? So my way up the ladder was being extraordinarily good.
Yes.
Like twice as good as the next guy at half the pay, because I was getting half the pay, often is the case.
Got it.
When I say leave bodies behind, what I mean is that I would work with people closely for 2 or 3 years, whatever the time period was, move up the chain and never talk to them again. I would move to the next company and never talk to these people ever again, right? They were in my mind at the time, I didn't think of them as a means to an end or a tool. They were just the previous rung on the ladder.
Yes. Yes. Wow.
I would just move on.
Yeah. So it wasn't about relationships. It was about just being purely focused and not being disrespectful or hurting anyone. But it is just, okay, I worked with you 20 years ago, 10 years ago in this role. That was in the past. And I'm now on this ladder. And there are new people that I need to make sure that I am reproving myself to, working 4 times as hard and getting half the pay. So hopefully next time I can work 3 times as hard and I'm just making this up, and get reforced the pay.
Yeah,
right. Like, holy crap, that's a lot of stuff, Robert.
Yeah. Yeah. And the thing I look back now on is that, separate from the relationship part of it, there were people along the way who I was helping, maybe even, I wouldn't call it mentoring, we'll just call it supporting in ways and giving them direction. And a lot of times as a leader, I was leading these people. And then when the opportunity came for me to step on that next rung, midstream,
sure,
I dropped and moved.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what did it do? What did that do to them?
Hurt them, hurt their feelings, right? They thought they had a friend, they thought they had a relationship, and all of a sudden, our friend Robert only cares about himself. He's up there now. He's not going to talk to me because I serve no value, perhaps. Robert, and again, so happy that you have realized this. Did you have people that were helping you get up that ladder? Did you have mentors?
Yes. So it turns out, and again, when you're like laser focused, 1 and 1 doesn't often equal 2. So it turns out that people who helped me, there was a guy I worked with, my first real computer job, gave me a break, allowed me to do things that no one would have ever allowed me to do based off of my pedigree. So I wrote software, I did networking, he was a small company, so you could wear a lot of hats. But that guy didn't have to give me a chance. Not only did he give me a chance, but I was at the age, early 20s, where I thought I knew everything, right? And he dealt with the pain that comes along with a know-it-all 20-something-year-old. Very talented, but I didn't know it all. Not only did he give me that opportunity, but he introduced me to the guy who I would eventually work for, that like really gave me a boost in my career. And I moved to Minnesota. And that particular guy, who I still talk to, he was already successful when I met him. I got recruited to Minnesota. I think I may have been the only Black person in that office. Not the only Black person in his company, but in headquarters, which was a relatively small office. I think it had no reason to take that chance, but he did, based off of recommendation. And then he embraced me in a way that just, Midwesterners are a lot nicer than a lot of East Coast people, but he like meant it. And he has stayed with me throughout my career. worked for him for just a few years. And whenever I had a question,
Yes.
what, how should I,
Still there.
still there to
Yeah.
this day. I'm
Wow.
now retired. To this day, he is still there for me for reasons that are because he's a good human being.
Yeah. So when people don't need to talk to you, there's a theme that we're getting here, Robert. When people don't need to talk to you and they do, when people don't need to help you and they still do, when they're not needed in your life to help propel you, they're still there. When you got a degree, even though you didn't need one, there's these commonalities of doing and of being and of making the extra effort with relationships. You made the extra effort individually to succeed. You got there. And I'm curious, and I know our listeners are curious. This will go out to well over 100,000 people. I'm curious, when did your perspective on leadership change?
So it's interesting. People affectionately and sometimes not affectionately would call me Darth Vader as far as a leader, because one, very deep voice, and I'm about the size of Darth Vader and with the Earl Jones voice.
Yeah.
And personality wise, I was very much Darth Vader. It wasn't until later in my career when I was no longer the underdog, no longer the one looked down upon, when I was no longer being paid half as much, but probably being paid twice as much
Uh-huh.
as the next person. And I got a chance to look at the other people. Like, finally took my head out of the cloud, or maybe another part of my anatomy,
Yeah.
started looking around, and I realized that I had achieved so much, but I saw in corporate America often the minority or the woman or the person who is other disabled or other enabled, I believe is the way it's communicated now.
Mm-hmm.
I would see them going through what I went through, and I had the ability to actually help. Right.
Yes.
And
Yes.
I could turn back to the light side versus being on the dark side,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Star Wars analogy.
Yeah. So was that 5 years before retirement? Was that 3 years before retirement? Was it 10 years before retirement? How long did they get to see the good side of Robert Shelton, the great side?
Some got to see that part. The people who I was fighting for them to see the dark side of me, but they got to see the lighter side. I want to say maybe the last 5 years.
Okay. Okay.
Um, and there was one other time I used to work for usatoday.com, and I got fired. My only time I ever got fired from a job.
Mm-hmm.
I got fired because I essentially went to war against my boss for my team.
Wow.
Yeah. And that taught me a valuable lesson about how corporate politics actually works, in that you actually have to play politics if there are corporate politics. And I didn't. I just tried to do by force of will. Thank God, by the way. And this is what I try to tell people I mentor. Every bad thing is a bad thing. If I hadn't gotten fired from that job,
Right.
I wouldn't have, because my next job was Microsoft.
Yes.
If I hadn't gotten fired from that job, I wouldn't be retired right now. Right. I would still be working and struggling to get to the 62 or 65. And I would definitely not. And Microsoft was my dream job from when I was 14.
Uh-huh.
Right. If I hadn't gotten fired from USA Today, I would have never even applied for Microsoft.
Right.
And I never would have gotten to live out the dream that corresponded with that.
Yeah. It happened for you, not to you.
Yes. And
Pandemic, just with similar stories with so many people.
yes.
Pandemic happened. My team personally was losing their job. My job was going to be going away. So that was the impetus that pushed me to do this full time. And it has been not easy, but the most fulfilling thing I've ever done in my entire life, and meeting the most incredible people like yourself, Robert, that it happened for me. So
yeah, and I'm thankful that it happened for you as well, because I've seen a lot of your podcasts, and they're in the genre of my beliefs as well. So if that hadn't happened for you, then you wouldn't have done this, and then therefore the value wouldn't have.
Yes. Yeah. And Robert, there are so many people that are listening and will be listening that this is helping them. Like, okay, the life lessons already, there's probably 50 already that you shared. I knew I wanted to get out of this environment, and I saw what the new environment looked like. Not that you realized how bad the growing up environment was, but you could see that it could be different, Then you had resources. You had the support of your mother. You had authors. You had Zig Ziglar. You had Dr. Wayne Dyer. You had that teacher. Then it became your mother was unselfish and drove you to community college so you could, while in high school, learn how to do this and this. And then it was the non-judgmental aspect of working at the jewelry place, being able to see here's a very wealthy person dressed in oil, wearing overalls, yet he had more money that's and spent it. I need to perceive people different, like so many different things. And what I think is so cool about you, Robert, is that now that you are officially done, you achieved what you wanted to achieve. And it's almost like you said the last 5 years of, and again, not that there was a bad side of you, but the opposite side of Darth Vader, whatever that is, when Darth Vader becomes good, like that is what you are spending your time focusing in on. It's helping people. Can you tell us two things? I guess I want to share one other thought. I asked you the first time that I was introduced to you, I said, oh, just curious, what do you do for a living? You're here almost every single day, just like me. What are you working on? And you're just like, I'm retired. And I said, so it's interesting. You look like you're very busy when you come here. And he's just like, yeah, I want to have that purpose, but I'm doing research. I'm learning. I'm still doing things, but it's at your own pace and at your own progress. No one is telling you that you need to be there from 8 until 11
Right.
doing research on, but you are very focused when you're doing that. And then I said, oh, what are some great pieces of advice that you would give people that are finishing their career? And I don't want to put you on the spot, but there's one thing that you shared. You said, when someone asks you to do something, at least spend the first year
Saying no.
Yes. Tell us why, because I love that.
Yeah, one of the things that I learned along the way, I had a retirement consultant, which is a thing. You can actually hire people who can help you with that transition. Typically, these are people who have a psychology background combined with business, or people who have been retired and failed at it and started helping and helped other people along the journey. One of the things that I was told was, given how I was wired, and you heard about how I got to where I was, so you got this, you can understand how I was wired to always be on and moving forward and try. That type of person tends to fail in their retirement because they've achieved the status, and that status becomes their identity. I used to be the VP,
Right.
the CTO, this, that, and the other. They're used to people calling them in the morning and asking them their opinion on a variety of things, and they get to be the mover and the shaker. And then you go into retirement, and that first day, you get no phone calls, no emails. Nobody cares who you used to be. You're just a dude at the coffee shop. And in this conversation, I was advised, given how you're wired, the first 6 to 9 months, you say no to everything because you're going to get more opportunities for jobs, consulting, or whatever the case may be, than you've ever had in your life. You won't have to apply for things. They're going to come to you, which is exactly what happened.
Yep.
And within 30 days of me retiring and announcing it on LinkedIn, I'd gotten probably 3 or 4 feelers for jobs that I frankly would have killed for 5 years earlier. Right. And these were just like, not even me reaching out. These are people who were trying to recruit me in. And I remember what I was told, and I said no to everything. And he was a character. He said, even if they ask you if you want fries with that, your answer is no to everything. And it was very valuable advice because it turns out that the person who I found out that I was 6 months after I retired, I remember that guy. I remember that guy, but I hadn't been that guy in a very long time.
Yes.
That guy took the Darth Vader helmet off. And
Yes.
was actually a very emotionally, like my mother and my sister, much more emotionally available person. But no one that I worked with would have ever thought that. Right? I was the hard charging, maybe other words that go along with that, right? That's what I realized when I took that time literally away from everything.
Yes.
That the person who I was not the person who I'd been for the last 20 plus years of my life.
Incredible. Incredible. What a revelation. And now I know that you are mentoring individuals. What are you finding most fulfilling with what you are doing now? And I'm not going to say that you're retired, Because to me, you will never be retired. You are always, now you are more focused on helping those people than ever before. What do you find most fulfilling of what you're doing now?
The thing I find most fulfilling is that the people who I talk to are ranging from their mid-20s to people who are slightly older than me.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and what I got the corporate America thing figured out and did really successful at was successful obviously at it. What I'm able to do now is to try to get people to not do the damage to themselves and their psyche
Mm.
in advising people like how to move in their career while at the same time how to protect their humanity. That's because that's the thing that I fear that I may have lost for a period of my career is that
Yeah.
I wasn't very human. I
Mm.
was just focused, and there's a lot of people who I was not nice to, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they were in between me and my goal.
Understood.
Right?
Understood.
And trying to teach people now
Yeah.
how to achieve their goal while at the same time doing it with a certain amount of humanity is what I'm working.
Oh, incredible. And Robert, just this morning, I've been selected to speak at a couple of conferences coming up. And the topic is being a kindness catalyst, and also doing decency, which is what you are talking about. You can still be nice to people and kind and care and be empathetic. And I'm coming up with this new idea of this decency quotient. I can be smart IQ, I can be empathetic EQ, but unless I do things and make decisions that are going to be right for other people and good for other people, doesn't really matter if I'm smart and I know how people feel. I need to make the decisions that are going to benefit other people. And I think that's really what you're talking about. And you've learned this through your career. And thank goodness, Robert, that you are young enough that you still have the energy and the enthusiasm of being able to share that with others, that you can be successful, that you can treat people well, that you can have humanity and do it all, basically. And Robert, right now, do you feel like you're doing it all?
I'm getting there. I am still as I have a new job, and my new job is learning how to be someone who is retired. And I don't mean retired in the sense of the 1970s. I'm sitting in a rocking chair, drinking a lemonade and watch cars go by, but more of the financially independent, retire early, meaning I'm still doing things.
Of course.
I now that I have recovered now that I've been able to take off the armor and put away the sword that I had to carry for so many years. By the
Mm-hmm.
way, just to be clear, and
Yeah.
I tell people who are mentored, people like that, people like who I was, the reason why they walk around with the armor and carry the sword is out of fear.
Yes.
My number one thing throughout my career that I was trying to avoid was the things that made me afraid, right? I was afraid of being exposed for not having a degree. I was afraid for being a minority in an environment in which, especially in tech, there are not a lot of minorities. I was afraid of moving into a neighborhood in which I would be the other, right? As I
Mm-hmm.
moved up there. I was all of these things, and what I did was I put on this armor and I got my sword and I went out and I tried to kill before I got killed. Thing.
Yeah.
What that builds as a human being is someone who not only are you not proud to be around, but they themselves are not proud to be around.
Mm-hmm.
Right now is my time to undo that and try to become more of a full human being. In other
Oh,
words, I've achieved the financial part.
right.
Many people, many actors and entertainers and
Yeah.
athletes and business owners and CEOs, you see these guys, you see a lot of these people achieve that level of success and
Mm.
they're miserable. They're miserable because of who they had to be in
Yes.
order to achieve that.
And they're not having the revelation of now it is my time to be able to help people and to take
Yeah.
off the armor, which is exactly what you're doing. Rob, phenomenal conversation. I do have one last question for you. When you, and I'm curious, so focused on achieving and leaving relationships behind and not being the person that you want to be, and maybe not necessarily respecting or liking who you were because you had to be killing people before they killed you, as you had just described. Tell us about your wife. How long have you been married? And while has she been around during the focus times of, I need to step up, I need to step up, I need to step up? And how were you able to maintain and build that relationship with your wife when it doesn't sound like that was a very natural thing for you to do, at least from a business lens, right? From a professional lens. Does the question make sense, if you don't mind sharing?
It does. So I've been married for 25 years, which is at this point nearly half of my life.
Uh-huh.
Married to this woman. And I often speak glowingly of my wife because she's had to be an incredibly strong person. It turns out I married a woman who's as strong as my mom was. Yeah.
Wow.
They're both about 5'3", 5'2", 5'3". They say they're 5'4", but only with one inch heels on. But
Yeah. Yeah.
they're very strong women.
Mm.
And it took a strong woman to initially what I thought was to deal with a very strong personality. But now I've realized that I needed a strong woman to protect me when I wasn't out with the armor and the blade. Right?
Yeah.
I could go out in corporate, I could go out and slay the dragon every day. But
Yeah.
when I came back home, I needed somebody who could run the home, who could,
Yeah.
protect me when I couldn't protect myself.
Yeah, because the vest, the armor came off when you came home. It better, you need to be you. Otherwise, that's too much pressure, too much intensity. Let me just be me.
Yeah.
And you knew that your wife would be able to protect you. Oh,
Yes. And
tell us her first name.
her name is Veronica.
Veronica. All
Yeah.
right. Veronica Shelton. We need to meet her at Goose Cup sometime,
She
okay?
comes in every now and then, and
Okay.
everybody likes her better than they like me, so they always clear when she comes in.
And I have to tell you, you and I have known each other for quite some time, and to see the brightness that you have today in this video, because you are sharing things that matter from your heart. And thank you for that, because that's a vulnerable position to be in, to remove your armor and say, I'm willing to share ideas with you, Bart, and your listeners that I think is going to be able to help them and let them understand my struggle and how I've been able to learn and grow and achieve financially and personally. That's not always easy to do, but the brightness of you and sharing this, Robert, I am so excited that this is going to go out to so many different people, and they're going to take notes, and they're going to want to connect with you on LinkedIn if that's okay.
Yeah.
And again, it's Robert Shelton, Shelton. Is that probably the best way just to connect with you? I don't want to overwhelm you with a million different mentor requests, but right, connect with Robert there. That's at least right, step one. And then last question I have for you, and I promise, I do ask my guests often to complete this statement, because the name of the podcast and my company, most people don't, right? But you do. What would you complete the sentence? Most people don't blank. What initially comes to mind?
Given this conversation and what I've been thinking about for the last year, I would say most people don't see life as it is. They see it as the story or the narrative that they have in their mind. I'm going to have a life that looks like X. I'm going to have a family that looks like Y. I'm going to have a career that looks like Z.
Mm-hmm.
And while they're envisioning that thing, which is not, reality is actually happening. Mm-hmm. And because there's a disconnect between those two. Now, I'm all about visualization. You absolutely need to visualize where you want to be in life in order to get there. Mm-hmm. But you have to live in reality. If you're not focused on reality, you miss opportunities. And I say opportunities to move in your career, but opportunities to grow as well. And it's the twists and turns in life that if you're not paying attention, you will miss. The thing that looked like it was a horrible mistake, because you're not actually paying attention. You don't realize the lesson that you're supposed to learn from that horrible mistake that will set you up for that great success.
Yeah, right. Oh, absolutely brilliant. And it even aligns with the story that you shared about your son, right? You want to see life as it is. And at that time, your son wanted you and needed you, right? But you didn't see that because you were so focused on the vision of, if I nail this Zoom call, I'm going to make it to the next level. So I think what a great reminder to see life as it is. Yes, have goals and have manifestations and visions of how you want things to be, certainly shoot for that, but don't forget where your feet are, essentially. We are here right
Because there's some
now.
moves to be made right
Yeah.
now. But if you're looking down range, you're missing the.
Yeah. Oh, what great stories, Robert. I cannot thank you enough. I'm so, again, proud to know you, to be able to see you in person, and to be able to talk more about the stories of what you've experienced and how you truly are helping others. Robert Shelton, again, I feel strange saying this, but retired senior technology executive, formerly with Microsoft. But I'm going to say Robert Shelton, a gentleman that is removing the armor, removing the helmet, putting down his sword to be able to enjoy as is, and to be able to help people navigate things that you've already gone through. They're swimming in the waters that you were able to swim upstream in, and you know the good ways and the good channels, and that is creating fulfillment and contentment for you, which is, I think, everyone's ideal, right, end goal. You want to be happy, you want to be fulfilled. Yes, you want to have enough money, but you want to make sure that you're doing good things and living life the way that you should, which I think, again, proud of what you're doing, Robert, and the changes of what you've seen and truly how you're helping people. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.